Suprabhat, good morning, Shubho Shakal, Salam Alaikum. And thank you for coming. Thank you for Takat Samit, Diana, Rajiv, Nadia, and everyone who is here. So, thanks Mustafa to thinking about me, though it is not your problem with the COOMARASWAMY and Tagore and all. I'm a practicing artist from India, and always it's been a problem with me. What should be a right term to use for art after independence or before independence, because it says something Bengali school, and I find Bengali school is something bit of troublesome term. And then after independence, the whole idea of Bengali school has dissolved, and they say it is a modern. But I don't know which way we should derive the term modern in context of India. So it's a very personal problem as a practicing artist, because end of the day I make art, and through my art only I do whatever in my life, the research and everything. So I start with something very I don't know whether it is difficult or something, but contemporary artists would not agree with me. But I'm also in a dilemma whether we should agree or not. Like COOMARASWAMY has said, art is nothing tangible. We cannot call painting, quote-unquote, art as the word, quote-unquote, again, artifact, and, quote-unquote, artificially imply. The thing made is work of art, made by art, but not itself art. The art remains in the artist and is the knowledge by which things are made. Then again he said, artist is not a special kind of man, but every man is a special kind of artist. The man incapable of completion cannot be an artist, but only a skillful workman. What COOMARASWAMY suggested is that culture is a living heritage, not a museum piece. But all the time he was a curator of the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, and I don't know. To him, the museum is an institution embodied a classification of dead culture, collected and classified by the very scientific industrial mind that had forced them into obsolescence. He thus condemned the museum as a dead order resulting from a narcophilia and ethnocide process as a part of the living ecology of traditions. COOMARASWAMY felt that only a metaphysical view of traditional society could provide an ecological system where dualism of the symbolic and the instrumental did not exist, and he cited the case of an Indian woman who refused to buy a washing machine because she was worried about her washerman livelihood. I don't know whether still it is relevant today or not. It's a very strange word, because when I came to Delhi, the first thing I bought the washing machine in my life. I'm sorry, I'm just going a bit different. For COOMARASWAMY, the craft model of tradition were ways that must be kept alive to remind science of vision and orders from which science itself is esteemed. In context of craft, I must say that still in India, the Government School of Art in Kolkata, we have Western style painting department and Indian style painting department. It's a very strange, after all these years of independence, India still having this sort of a department. And we have a big hierarchy of high art. The way we train, we artists, we have a big ego actually. I mean, that brought me into the research study or whatever, looking into these books and text, because it is, as I said, it's not your problem, it's my problem. I'm sharing with you the journey of myself with COOMARASWAMY, Tagore, Vivekananda, and Sister Nivedita, because when I came to Delhi, I find the whole discourse happening with the Western perspective, and many times curators come to us and they say, we want to do some Indian show, and I don't know what is the Indian show is actually, because whether I'm an Indian artist or I make Indian art, I'm still confused. Anyhow, so back to COOMARASWAMY's text, he considered that craftsmanship as a traditional lifestyle and a true form of artistic experience was being destroyed because it was considered as an implemented to the modern development of science and technology. Primitive man made no real distinction of the sacred from the secular. His weapons, clothing, vehicles, and house were all of them imitations of divine prototypes, and were to him even more what they mean than what they were in themselves. He made them as a more by incarnation in the and by rites. Thus he fought the thunderbolts, put celestial garments, rode in a chariot of fire, saw in his roof and starry sky, and in himself more than this man, so and so. All these things belong to these less miseries of the crafts and to the knowledge of the companion. Nothing of the remains to us but the transformation of the beard of sacrificial rites and the reference to its prototype of the honor paid to an icon. See, this presentation, as Mustafa mentioned about the nature, I am looking at it a bit wider perspective, like nature means the nature, the direct translation. At the same time, the way we artists, we see something as a nature of that existence, and then we translate into the artistic language. So many years ago, I was surprised how two bearded Brahmin scholar. I think Tagore was also Brahmin, and this COOMARASWAMY is also Brahmin, because I get to know he called us a Boston Brahmin, and I was wondering in my childhood why he called a Boston Brahmin. Anyhow, so I extended thoughts on art, nature, and time. However, my curiosity goes beyond the caste or elite issue, and I'm interested in the philosophies of these two great scholars. Fortunately, I studied at Shantiniketan 7 years, founded by Rabindranath Tagore, and tried to grasp his ideas about nature and education. COOMARASWAMY entered in my life much later, and today I recollect my memories of these personalities. My presentation will explore the idea and philosophy of art and nature into the context of pre-independence era, because that's the area I'm still not very clear to understand, because it is not evolved in many ways. Perhaps many of us don't consider this period as a modern, but through this presentation I would like to raise the question of modernity even. I will try to open the door to historical context as discussed and perceived by Rabindranath and COOMARASWAMY, as I feel I thought still relevant to the present at some point. COOMARASWAMY suggested that culture is a living heritage, not something to belongs in a museum. But I don't know which way this problem has to be, this issue has to be raised and questioned and keep alive. That's a very, very big issue, I believe, because with the government bureaucracy in India, it just seems next to impossible, I believe. Anyway. To him, the museum as an institution embodied a classification of dead cultures collected and classified by the very scientific industrial mind that has forced them to obsolescence. He thus condemned the museum as a dead order resulting from a process of necrophilia and ethnocide. He saw art and profound grasp to in ideals of harmony and truth of Indian art helped him understand the evolution of Indian culture as a crossing of spiritual tendency. On the other hand, Rabindranath could see himself as an integral part of nature and could dissolve. Of course, he discovered himself within nature from Bangladesh only, do remember, because he was setting up in a Kolkata. It was a claustrophobic house. It's not that idea of nature. I think he was staying at Tagore Estate in Pabna, Shilaidaho and Rajshahi. That was the time he realized about the vast nature. And he invited many artists, including Nandalal Bose, Mukul De, Gaganendranath, to realize the nature, realize the space. I think from that point of journey, he started talking about space, and also I did a work on that idea of space and Shantiniketan architecture. That is a different thing. And nature and earth, water, air. In this state, he is no longer perceived the earth merely as earth or something apart from himself. The flow of water merged with a stream of joy in his soul, and he wrote. It's a bad translation, but I want this to share because I don't want to be too poetic, but it's a direct translation. If I be the earth, if I be water, if I be a twig, if I be a fruits of flower, if I travel the world and beyond with this one life, there would be no cause for care. Wherever I go, I would find the infinite self and the embrace of the boundless. Or return me, O earth, the child of your lap in your midst. It's written in the Atmaporichaya. I made this simplified translation because it is interesting to look at his one poem called Duar. It's called Door. And perhaps for me it was a very early idea about the curatorial text from Tagore, because when Nandalal was doing the mural in Shantiniketan Patavan doors, and before he starts each day and each door, Rabindranath used to give him a poem called Dorja. And that latter came compiled in a book, and it was a very simplified text actually to communicate with the artist. And I find it is amazing to do that, and still the mural exists. I don't know, I'm not showing that image perhaps, but it is there actually. So neither of these thinkers believed that art and nature belonged in a museum, but they attempted to associate them more closely with existing life. Of course, Vishwabharati is no more close with the nature anyway today. If you go there, nothing is there. I think during last late 90s or some early 20s, I think we have seen the last sunset. But still, it's fine. They try to educate us to preserve the essence of life, which is called art, and they include nature as an integral part of life. My presentation will also look at the thoughts of Swami Vivekananda and Sister Nivedita and the way they resonate with Indian art, because without their journey, I think Coomaraswamy and Rabindranath would not be complete. So let's start with the slides. Yes, so first slide, you can see the Swami Vivekananda as a Paribrajak. He realized the Indian art as well as the Western art even. And today, I think many of you know the Charles Freer Gallery, the Charles Freer invited him for dinner, and he opened up his Southeast Asian collection to look at Vivekananda. And also Vivekananda traveled to see many exhibitions with Patrick Geddes, the famous environmentalist and town planner. And the right hand, and he saw this woodwork left hand side of your panel. This one, it's in the Artpur in West Bengal, is a fascinating woodwork panel. And he wrote to Nivedita that you must go outside of Kolkata and look at the potters and look at this woodwork, how they have done. And I think some point you should translate and inspire the artist to bring back to the Indian art studies. It's said by Swami Vivekananda. This is amazing. It's a very, very important visual document. At the same time, this is Vivekananda's letter where he explaining why Ramakrishna Mission logo should be like this. It's a whole explanation of the Ramakrishna Mission logo. It's written by Swami Vivekananda. I think many people, they misunderstood Vivekananda because he died very early. Again, he was a bit eccentric person, and of course sometime is a mess because this Turiyananda and Alasinga Perumal's letter has been published, and he said never publish all this letter, but Ramakrishna Mission did publish the letter, and that's a very, very anger letter. And sometimes people read that letter and they said, oh, Vivekananda was a bad person, he was a right-wing Hindu, but it's nothing to do with that. I think as an artist, I think I need to take that positive energy from every personality and every decade and go ahead with my artistic journey. So, and that's the book compiled by Swami Vivekananda. It's all about music, and interestingly, this book, in this book, he has included some of Tagore's song even. And himself, Vivekananda was a good singer, not that bad singer actually. And yesterday Shatidi has already shown this drawing, but this is something, the original version, because those drawings has been translated in the many lino, woodcut and prints, but this is the original pen ending drawing first made by Nandalal Bose. And I think I got stuck with this drawing for some reason, because you see how this Shamar Thakur, Gagan Thakur and Rabindranath Thakur, they are in a relaxed mode. Perhaps that is one problem with the Bengali school or art during nationalistic movement, because we could not get much information, and number 5, house demolished and many things happened. Because of this scenario, perhaps they are not very conscious how to preserve the heritage and culture. They are just with themselves. I don't know. And it's making the Tagore collection catalog from where they inspired their entire Bengali school as a working term. I'm using it, and Coomaraswamy was indicating Nandalal. I have seen some part of this visual catalog and few hundreds of drawings sitting at Kasturbai Lalbhai collection in Ahmedabad, and I think precisely 22 drawings exhibiting still in the LD Museum in Ahmedabad. I think one need to see that Mughal drawing. It's amazing, and one can really feel that how the Bengali school as a working term again, how it has been developed. And also Shatidi has explained about the space and everything that I will come later on about the Tagore House, because I have documented the entire Tagore House Museum in 2000-2001, and later on the entire Shantiniketan architecture. So I had a little bit of experience of that house in many ways. And this is the left-hand side drawing. There's the Mulla Do Peaja. It's on the skein, and this is one of the drawing from the Tagore collection actually. And you can see what a fascinating drawing. And this right hand side, it's planned by Nivedita sketch and drawing, which is for the designing for the Vivekananda medal. And you see how they were all thinking about the artistic practice and the different motive taking from the tradition and transforming it in a different way and making a planning for a Vivekananda medal. It's Nivedita's original drawing, and it is still there in Kolkata. Because as I said, I always look at the art, what after theory and what everything, what artist has done. And many of us, yesterday even Shatidi was mentioning about this potter style painting of Nandalal Bose. I think this is one potter style painting of Nandalal Bose which was selling through this grocery seller, and it's quite interesting how they looked at that potter style. At the same time, in architecture, one less known personality, Rabindranath Tagore, I must mention his name because every people talk about Rabindranath Tagore, but I think Avanindranath, Gaganendranath and Rothindranath, including Jyotirindranath, Suneni Devi would be mentioned. Even we are not discussing about the other Tagore of the Pathuria Ghata house. They have a huge contribution in the whole reformation of the Bengal or Indian culture or whatever you said. And this is, you can see how the Japanese influence from Fujiwara house, Nara period, it has been developed in Shantiniketan house. It was, once upon a time, it was Avanindranath studio actually. And it's a wooden panel design. And this house, Udayan, if you have visited, you could see 50% concrete work and 50% wooden work. And wood and cement is just contemplating each other. Without wood, cement cannot stand. Without cement, wood cannot stand. It's amazing house actually. And I think hardly people has explored the idea of the utility design, the graphic, textile and architecture and many things, cartoon and everything related with the Bengali school or this Tagore family. You know, what they have done, an extended Tagore family and other people. Of course, this is Coomaraswamy and Tagore. We all know this photograph, but that's Ravindra Bharati collection. This fascinating portrait of Avanindranath Tagore he made the Coomaraswamy's portrait. And recently I discovered Tagore and Coomaraswamy's 4 correspondence, and of course, one correspondence with the O.C. Ganguly. And in that letters, in Tagore's letter, he was mentioning about Shantiniketan and the Swadeshi and all, they're discussing a little bit. And the O.C. Ganguly's letter, he has mentioned about some old artistic literature, even the Vishnu Dharmottara Puran, what some of the books, I think O.C. Ganguly has sent to Coomaraswamy, and O.C. Ganguly was asking, have you read the book and all, those sort of a discussion. It was quite interesting, the O.C. Ganguly's letter and this Tagore and AKC letter. That's just a recent discovery. And as I mentioned that Bengali school was quite fascinating, and how they are looking at the whole idea of this Vivekananda, Nivedita, Coomaraswamy and Tagore, and they're expanding into the artistic practice. This is something 1921 exhibition is published 1921, but I believe the exhibition happened in 1920 in Indian Society of Oriental Art in Kolkata. And you see, today we talk about site-specific installation, but I think this is a very interesting example of the site-specific installation, because they have their interior, furniture and a lot of things along with their art and sculpture within that. It's fascinating. Even this time Venezia Biennale, I have seen in Palazzo Fortuny, they have very similar concept, and they said, oh, it's a very new concept. Though I sent the curator to this image, I said, well, look, whether it is new or old, I don't know. I'm not the person to argue it, but this is also one evidence actually. So I think this is very important for me, and that's why it's a problem with me, and what is to accept and what not to accept, and how one should look at the idea of modern, you know. And this is fascinating example. It is published in Rupam. You can see this is edited by O.C. Ganguly. He used to do this Rupam magazine. And as Coomaraswamy said, to looking at the crafts and all sorts of things, and you can see this important evidence of the Tagore family member, Avan Gagan, Shamarendranath, they're all sitting at the southern veranda, and they're looking at that Bengal toys, terracotta toys or brass toys. This is fascinating example, and it's not just they are casually, I think they are having a very deep discourse on that in some of the examples of this drawing. The toy, it is not available all of them, but few of them sometime you can see in the village. And strangely, this kind of toys I have seen made by the women artists in the village. The husband make the sophisticated one the way we trained them, because we are the one who try to revive the craft, and that's, I think, one point we murdered the craft and traditional art. But these women, they are still alive and they're making fascinating work. I have some of the toys in my collection, is amazing. And this is Pandit Than, and Vivekananda saw it, and you see he has written a fascinating course to the Advocate India, and it is from the notes from some wanderings with the Swami Vivekananda by Sister Nivedita, because after visiting Kashmir, I think he has written, and Nivedita drawn a lot of sketches on that, and Vivekananda has explained why he like, and what we was talking about this temple architecture, and this 10 minutes left. Okay, we'll go quickly. And you see, in Shantiniketan even, Tagore has developed and designed and thought of this kind of architecture, this his house, the Udichi, and you see how the erosive land of Birbhum in Shantiniketan, which is no more now, and which is quite fascinating, it has resonating in this architecture. I'm going very quick because time is shortage, but we can have more discussion. If you have a question, we'll come back again. And I think in Shantiniketan, the idea of space start very initial stage from underneath of the tree. I think this is a very early concept of architecture in Shantiniketan, because under the tree they are starting with the class. There's a fascinating photograph by Shambhu Shah. And as you know that I'm an artist, and I start with the visual archive, because visual archive make my questions and try to go with the research and all. So these 25,000 photographs sitting in Rabindra Bhavan archive, that made me to write that book on Tagore's architecture. And you see, there is a very unusual work of Rabindranath. It's just a small work in Rabindra Bharati collection. And you see how he was talking about space here, and it's just signature and his name, but it's a tree and some grasses are here. But I don't know, all the time Rabindranath has his conflict with the self and me, perhaps. It's my own reading, I don't know. He just places his signature and dates middle of the card. It's no point to do that, but still he did it. And this is fascinating drawings by Nandalal Bose. Again, it's talking about a huge sky with a bird. And this is famous southern veranda, and Oban Gogon sitting over there, and once this is photographed by E.O. Hopi and Abanindranath Tagore sitting at southern veranda. And once Tagore was talking to Abanindranath, and he said, Ki, why you guys are sitting at southern veranda and you don't go anywhere? I think you should travel all over the world and get your knowledge. But then Abanindranath said, Uncle, I can see the whole world through this southern veranda. And I find this is very appropriate photograph, the way he's looking outside. I think he's really absorbing the outer world. And of course, he did through his art and through his literature. I think his literature has still not been explored in that sense. And I was talking about the idea of space from this Bangladesh. This is the boat Podda. And I think from here only he started looking at the idea of Shantiniketan and space and nature and everything. And this is the doodlings and poems by Abanindranath Tagore. This is by Gaganendranath, J.T. And you see, if you have seen Khudur Jatra or any other Jatra Pala of Abanindranath Tagore, there are a lot of doodlings and drawings and collage. And of course, Khudur Jatra is a modern version of Ramayana through that advertising and newspaper cutting pages, which is very, very interesting idea. I think one should explore it as a post-Dada collage. And this is my reading how the Tagore's work was translating from his own house and Shantiniketan architecture and many things. This is the grand mirror in Jorashako house, and you see how the total internal reflection happening through this mirror. And this is something kind of an architectonic quality and self-expression of this Tagore's work. And this is my work as a practicing artist. I look at this archival material and built up something new archive to reread the archivist approach. This is the tree house by Kimotaro Kasahara, the Japanese artist who did work in Shantiniketan and lot. This house is no more exist. But you see here again how Tagore has drawn this drawing. It's amazing, it's interesting. It's not resonating that same house, but some point it is up from the ground and it is very different approach to that. And one of the finest example of the exhibition come education photograph by Ala Danielu and Remo Bornier. And this space is still exists, but it's not like this. It has got a skylight, and this skylight he saw in the Java Palace. And he wrote to Suren Kaur and Ratindranath, can you do it like that? So this is a kind of a skylight which is coming. They are having a class, at the same time they are having an exhibition here. It's called Habel Hall, and it's got a fascinating mural within it. But if you go there, you might not see. And again, in Tagore's painting and his architecture, it's just my own reading how it is resonating and how it is mixing up together with the physical architecture and his own drawing, you know. And oh yes, this is the Duar poem actually. You can see it's a very simple English, but this is the 4 poem he used to give Suren Kaur before he start his mural every day. And this is again this Tagore's boat and perhaps his own idea and existence something. And this is the boat he has used during his stay at Shilaidaho in Bangladesh. And in 1930s, I think one would not imagine what could be the exhibition site. It's not just a experimental architecture, Choiti, but it is also a site to exhibit the best artwork from Shantiniketan Ashram. Just imagine in 1930s they have thought of this space to exhibit artwork. And today we designed the exhibition space and many things, but this is a fascinating site. But again, by the name of restoration, it has got totally distracted, but still you can see the evidence. This is an old photograph during 1940s and 50s, but it is totally important site, I believe, and they have developed it. So you can see how they have translated the whole idea of nature, idea of the tradition and many things into the education system. But again, if you come back to the relevancy and consistency and existence, that's a big question that I'm not going right now, but that perhaps will come to the discussion. But again, you see this is the same photograph, but at the same time my teacher and friend Professor Devashish Banerjee has articulated that is a kind of an idea of Advaita. So of course this idea of Advaita, Vedanta and Upanishad was very fascinated with the Vivekananda and Nivedita and also Tagore later on, and also with the COOMARASWAMY. And now see how this RABINDRANATH made this painting is a tears holding with the lotus leaf. We can't see perhaps the detail of this work in this slide, but it is there in the print. And many of us, we talk about Tagore was colorblind or his paintings are very mystic, this and that. But this is Abanindranath's painting, and I think it's very important evidence because you see in Shantiniketan, he was sitting on the open terrace and look at the light condition over the sky. It is very interesting evidence to look at and read the Tagore painting in a different way and why he made that mystic sky, or that's, the paintings were kind of emerging from the surface all the time. Tagore painting was not a very preconceived thing. It's just an emerging journey, the way nature transformed themselves. And the left-hand side is the furniture designed by Ratindranath Tagore. It is still there. It is a fascinating furniture where you have your studies, where you have your breakfast table. Okay, time up. So, sorry, quickly run through the slides. GNT showed Tagore like this. Is not during non-cooperation movement. Tagore was flying to abroad. He was not taking part in the non-cooperation in India, and that's Bharat Mata. Okay, so quickly, that's a very beautiful drawing by Rabindranath in early stage, and this is by Abanindranath. Look at the furniture designed by Tagore. Sorry, I have to be quick because time out. That's the Japanese in the Sankiyan garden, and that's Tagore drawing. He proposed to make it in Shantiniketan. Okay, I'm not speaking, just go through the slides, that will be too long. That's it. Thank you.